Okay, ready to go.
Okay, welcome. I will now call the meeting, special council meeting, Township of Nairn and Hyman, open for business here at 7 o'clock. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll go into if there's any conflicts of interest tonight.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, none for me. So we'll move straight to delegations. So we do have Tiffany Cacchetto on the line from KPMG, and she'll be walking us through our 2020 financial statements. So I'll turn the floor over to her.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks so much. Is it okay if I share my screen then, just to?
Yeah.
Okay. Can everybody?
Yeah, I think Rod is on the phone, so he won't be able to see it, but he has the document that he can.
Great.
I think we all got it, so we can follow along on our laptops as well.
Okay, fantastic. I'll just reference the page numbers in case you're just calling in. So we'll jump right into to the presentation. The presentation that you're seeing, it all aligns with the draft financial statements that you would have as well. So all I did was just copy and paste it into this document just to provide a little bit of additional information. So the first page that you see here is the auditor's report. So what you would be looking here is just to say that these financial statements are prepared in accordance with the public sector accounting standards. And we would be proposing to issue in this paragraph here what's known as a clean or unqualified audit opinion. So just on to the next page, a few notes. The format and presentation of the audit report is consistent with what you would have seen in the previous year. And we would be issuing an unqualified audit opinion. An audit, of course, is the highest level of assurance in Canada when you're looking at a report on financial information. We did complete the audit using a materiality of around 43,000, and that was based on a percentage of operating expenses, which is consistent with what we do each year, and a posting threshold of 2,100, which means that every time we would have uncovered any adjustments or differences greater than $2,100, we would have discussed them with Belinda. All adjustments were corrected, so there's no uncorrected audit adjustments to note. You'll notice today's date on the financial statements, so assuming council approves them today, we can issue them in final. This is the one page that you'll see in a municipal financial statement, which effectively just says that management is responsible for preparing a good system of internal controls and processes to ensure that the financial reporting that you get on an ongoing basis is appropriate. So you don't want to just wait till the year-end audit to make sure that the financials and the processes are in place. That's effectively what this page here says, and Belinda will just sign off on it when the statements are finalized. So moving into the real meat of the presentation. So the first page that you see here is known as the statement of financial position. So think of this document as a snapshot as of a point in time. So this is all of the assets that were owned and all of the liabilities that were owed as of the year-end date. So you can see that at the end of the year, up to 4.9 million in accumulated surplus. So how did we get there? First of all, looking at the looking at the cash position, cash is up year over year. Reason for that is you can see that there's some positive changes in your working capital balances. So when payables are up and deferred revenue gets used, those items do impact your cash balance. You did also have a positive surplus in the current year, which is our main driver of why you would see an increase in the cash balance. Accounts receivable, that balance is pretty consistent year over year. Taxes receivable is down. We'll go over that in just one slide. Just want to point out a few things to note with the taxes receivable numbers. So looking at the composition of taxes receivable, I just want to highlight the fact that while the balance is down year over year, there were some write-offs of some larger tax balances in 2020. That was the main driver of why we're seeing that balance go down. So I guess just a note to say, really 2021 to make sure there's an increased focus on collections, so cash collections of those balances, just to make sure that they don't age. The older that they get, the more difficult they are to collect. So just to make sure that we're collecting on those balances. So obviously a good change here in the receivable as a percentage of the levy. So just make sure to keep that up in the coming year. So looking at how the financial assets changed, looking at the financial liabilities. So as I mentioned, accounts payable, that balance has increased as of the end of 2020. There was some additional invoices outstanding as of the end of the year. So there were some fees owing to the integrity commissioner, as well as some capital work that was still to be paid as of the end of the year. So those were the main drivers of that change right there. Deferred revenue, that balance in the prior year was OSIF dollars that had been received that were unspent. At the end of the current year, though, those OSIF dollars were all used, and you did receive some safe restart funding from the provincial government. That was the COVID-related funding that all municipalities received in Ontario. The instructions were, if that amount was received and not used, it should be deferred to 2021, and those amounts would be used at that point in time. So that's what that $36,000 is. It's just deferred to the end to 2021 to use then. Deferred revenue obligatory reserve, that's your federal gas tax dollars. So those have to be separately presented. That balance is down because the funding was used in 2020 for your capital, eligible capital projects, we'll call it. And then your landfill obligation, that balance just slightly changes as a result of the usage of the landfill annually, and that'll cause an increase in the obligation when the capacity gets used up. The last item on the statement of financial position is the tangible capital assets. So looking at your TCA, you can see a slight decrease year over year. The main driver of that is your additions were not as at the same level as your amortization expense. So amortization expense was $282,000, and you invested $220 in your capital asset additions. So the net of those two balances is what causes that decrease there. So on to the next page is just a bit of a summary on what you spent your $212,000 of capital on. It was mainly road work, so about $190,000 on some road upgrades, small amount on the water plant upgrade, some various small equipment, and then other very small miscellaneous additions as well in the year. So before I jump into the statement of operations, were there any questions on the statement of financial position at this time?
I'm good.
Okay.
Same here.
All right, perfect. Let's keep on going then. So the next item is the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So all of your revenue and all of your expenses for the 12 months. So from January 1st to December 31st. So first of all, let's take a look at your total revenue. So it does seem pretty comparable on a year-over-year basis, 1.654 to 1.651. Taxation revenue did increase in 2020, a combination of the assessment values from MPAC increasing, as well as a small increase in the tax rates. government transfers. So you'll see that your province of Ontario grants are lower in 2020. There's a lot of reasons for that. So in 2019, you might remember that you did receive about $210,000 of modernization funding. So that was one-time funding that the government did actually not have any stipulations attached to it in terms of what you had to utilize those funds on. So that obviously did not repeat in 2020. The increases though that we saw in 2020 were the funding that was utilized for your COVID expenses, so about $35,000 or so, and a higher amount of OSIF funding that was used for capital projects. So that was the $50,000 that would have been deferred in the prior year. Your Government of Canada grants, that number is up as well, and that's mainly an increased use of your federal gas tax dollars in 2020. User charges are pretty comparable on a year-over-year basis, so nothing really to note there. And the only other item is your other income. That line item is up as a result of the sale of various properties in 2020. So that netted the township about $66,000 of additional revenue. So how was that revenue spent? So just a few items to note. General government, it does look pretty consistent year over year, but there were some significant swings in that balance in 2020. So included in general government expenses are the increased tax write-offs that you would have noted in 2020. So without those write-offs, the general government expenses would have been lower because 2019 had included a significant amount of legal costs, and those were one time and did not repeat into 2020. Protection to persons and property, that item, line item is up a bit in 2020, and that's mainly as a result of an increase in amortization expense in the year. Transportation services, that item is up as well. It's not surprising given that we saw a lot of the capital work being done on the roads. There was additional expenses included for miscellaneous road work that was not deemed to be capital. So some additional contracting costs in 2020 that caused that line item to increase. And then the remaining items are pretty consistent on a year-over-year basis. I suppose the only other thing that I should have noted in the revenue is, just the note that consistent with what we were seeing with every municipality in 2020, decisions were made really to waive interest and penalties when the pandemic first hit back in early 2020. So you do see the corresponding decrease in revenue as a result of that decision. But that's consistent with what we would have seen across the board for the municipalities that we deal with. I know this particular slide has a lot on it, but I think it's important to talk about how the financial statements line up to what you would have budgeted for 2020. Because remember, the financial statements have to be prepared in accordance with the accounting standards, where your budget is more so prepared on a cash basis. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So what we've done here is we've adjusted those two columns here, amortization and additions. Those all relate to your capital items that would be included now on the balance sheet in the current year. And amortization typically is not really budgeted for by most municipalities. So when we look at the adjusted column to the budget, you can see that overall spending was about $25,000 less than the budget. The first item that you see here is your general government. So two things, some additional spending that wasn't in the original budget for the integrity commissioner. And then number two, the tax write-offs as well did contribute to that expense being increased. Protection is really under budget, mainly as a result of there was a $30,000 transfer to reserve that was budgeted, and that did not occur. Transportation is very much under budget, and that's mainly as a result of more capital expenditures being included in the budget for 2020 compared to what actually was spent. Recreation and culture, no surprise there. As a result of the pandemic, lower salaries, lower expenses in that programming, just as a result of there being less activity. And then planning and development, a bit of an increase there because the actual costs associated with planning amendments were a bit higher than what was budgeted for. So not really much to note here on the statement of changes in net financial assets. The only thing I just want to highlight is you did add about $130,000 almost to your net financial asset position. So think of that as if all of your lenders were to come today and ask you to repay every amount that you owed, you have a sufficient amount of net financial assets to cover off those obligations that you would have. So anytime you have the ability to increase that net financial asset number, it's always a good news story. So up to about almost 850,000 at the end of 2020. Surplus position. So again, some good news here. So number one, you were able to increase your reserve set aside by council to just over 630,000. So good news there. And then you can also see your general reserve. You actually had a bit of an increase there, so up to 244,000. So, you know, with a lot of the municipalities I've been working with, I think 2020 highlighted the need to have those funds to put away for a bit of a rainy day in the event that you need to access them as a result of some unexpected changes. So you're setting yourself up well as a town to be able to weather the storm should that need continue. And this is a reconciliation of the general surplus. So what we have to do to bring your surplus to what you would have been used to seeing in your budget is to remove everything relating to capital and then also look if you have any reserve transfers there. So as I had mentioned, good financial situation. So end of the year with about an $81,000 surplus. Also had some deferred safe restart funding that you've parked on the balance sheet that you're ready to go for 2021. So all things considered, a pretty good news situation in a year that was anything but ordinary as a result of the pandemic. So in terms of the matters for communication, our audit is fully complete at this point. We just need council's approval of the financial statements and then Belinda to send along the management representation letter, which we did send to her earlier today. There, just for your purposes, before you go and approve the statements, there were no changes that were noted to our initial audit plan. We did not have any disagreements with management. We worked very well with Belinda, and she put together a very good audit file for us to start with for audit purposes. All entries that we would have suggested were corrected in the financial statements, and there are not any significant control weaknesses that we needed to bring to your attention. And then the next part of the presentation is just some comparator analysis. So perhaps I'll just pause and see if there were any questions on the financial statements, and also to see if you wanted me to go through the financial indicators as well, or if you wanted to digest them as council yourself. I'm open to whichever you would like to do, so I'll just pause for a second to see.
Okay.
Yes, I do it. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one there. On your fees, I noticed it's going up quite a bit the last 2 or 3 years. And I noticed last year, 2020, there was one invoice there for preparation that I never saw there before, worth $2,000. But 2020, I just have to look at my paper here. 2020, it was our presentation. Oh, geez, I thought I was ready for this. Anyway, I know that the last 2 or 3 years have been going up quite a bit. It was around $14,000. Now it's up to pretty near $18,000. And I was just wondering what's the reason for so high? It's so sudden.
No, it's a great question, and thanks very much. So in the past, I would say last year and then the year before, there was some additional assistance that was provided just as Belinda was in the transition to the new role. So there was some additional work that would have been required to get set up and get things going. On a regular ongoing basis, I would not propose at all that any of that we would call, the special invoices for additional reconciliation time or anything like that would continue. It would just be the base audit fee and nothing further. And Belinda has definitely made great strides over the last year in terms of getting everything together. So I wouldn't be anticipating that we would be having any more of those additional reconciliation times that would be required or invoices that would be required. And I think that typically those were running in the range of $4,000 to $5,000 a year for the additional assistance. So that would not be needed any longer.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Are we going to get a book for this year's audit? I got it on the computer here. I like to have a book of it, or paperback, or whatever you want to call it.
No, absolutely. All you have to do is let us know that you would like that, and we'll get you as many printed copies as you would like. That's no problem at all. We'll coordinate with Belinda and we'll get those sent over.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
That's all I got right now.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions before I'll let Tiffany walk us through the indicators a bit, and then we'll see if we have any other questions after that.
Okay, perfect. So, so one thing to note, these are from last year's financial information return, because 2020 is not available for everybody at this time. So we're taking a bit of a look back in time. So the pandemic impact would not be seen here. So number one, just want to highlight. So anytime you have a ratio of greater than 1 for your financial assets to liabilities, it would be a more solid financial situation, because you'll remember what I said a few slides ago. If all of your debts were called at one time, this would tell me that you would have a sufficient amount of financial assets to cover off those obligations at that point. If you don't, that's when you start to have to worry about, lines of credit and or some sort of financing like that. So you can see that you're definitely on the higher end of the range here. Higher end of the range here. I'm thinking I'm presenting to Baldwin right now, and I'm not. So you can see definitely a solid financial position here, definitely higher than your average comparators, which is great to see. Your total reserves. So this breaks it down to try and compare a bit more apples with apples, because it's very difficult to sit there and say, well, this municipality has this many reserves without a bit of context. So here, what you're seeing is reserve funds per household. So the one thing that I will note is when you compare to the prior year, you also had about an $80,000 increase in this balance in the year. So while you might have seen the drop because in 2019 there was some reserves that were used for capital purposes, you're then going to see that swing up in the current year. So I would say that while you're at the $2,000 range now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're up more at your $3,000 per household as you come into 2020. So again, compared to your comparator group, not a lot of municipalities that would have additional reserves. I would just say, so number one, everybody's in positive territory. So there are some reserve dollars that have been set away. So it's just to make sure that you're keeping that up so that you do have those funds available if the need arises. So operating expenses as a percentage of taxable assessment. So what this is trying to get at is, if your operating expenses are increasing, how are you going to be able to fund them? You would want to be interested in looking at whether or not you can fund your operating expense increases by, not increasing tax revenues. So you are at a higher end of the range than some of your comparators, but I would say if you look at the average, it would be pretty close. At the end of the day, you only have a few levers that you can pull. You either have grants that you're able to get, and typically speaking, those grants are all project related and project driven. So you have to use them for a specific purpose. So that doesn't really help you fund operating expenses per se. You can and other revenues. So those can be good to temporarily curb any taxation revenue increases. But it is very difficult for smaller municipalities to do much if they keep tax revenue flat on a continual basis. I always say when I'm speaking to municipalities that it's like a 5 and a 10-year impact. If you start to make decisions on freezing tax rates, you're going to more so feel the repercussions of that in a 5 or 10-year period, because you can't play catch up if you don't increase those, if you don't keep on par with those operating expense increases. So just something to ponder there. Capital additions as a percentage of amortization expense. So what this means is how much are you investing in your capital? These numbers really do shoot up depending on. Think of what's going to happen for you as a municipality this coming year. You have a lot of road work that you're doing. So a lot of investment that's going to be shown in the capital for the township. So that's what does change these items. What you're really wanting to do is to make sure that you're not having your additions significantly lower than your amortization. Because if that is the case, that shows that you're not investing in your capital on a regular enough basis as those assets are being used. So you can see here that you're over 100, which means that you are investing your capital at an amount that exceeds your amortization expense. This year you didn't, but I think that was more so a bit of an anomaly because I think you have a lot of work that's going to be happening in 2021. So just keep an eye on that. You can see here the lower comparators here. At some point in time, that will be something that can catch up with you a little bit because this means that you're spending half the amount of your amortization expense on your capital, which means that you have an aging infrastructure that's going to be tough to catch up on that capital spend. Residential taxes per household. I would say this is another really good comparator because you can see where you are in comparison to your peer group. I might argue you're on the lower end of the range compared to your peer group. I always say to look at this particular slide and then go and look at the slide that's reserve funds per household. A lot of times you're going to see a corresponding, when you have that higher amount of your taxation revenue, you're able to put more money into reserve. So the two kind of marry together because you have that funding that doesn't have to be tied up for a particular project or something like that. So all of this to say, I do think you have a bit of room if you look to where your competitors are in the region, in the north. You have a bit of wiggle room to move up there in your taxation revenue if the need would arise. Financial assets to liabilities, and then looking at your long-term debt per household. This is not applicable to you guys because you don't have any long-term debt outstanding, but you can see, the lack of reserves can then potentially result in the need to go and take on additional long-term debt to go and fund capital projects and things like that. So not every one of your comparator municipalities do have this, but it's just something to keep in mind. Taxation revenue as a percentage of total assessment. So this really just does look at what MPAC says that the value of your properties are in the township. And, you know, if you have the ability to generate some incremental revenues in the future, you are at a bit of the higher end. I would say you did a bit of cleanup in 2020 from some of the older balances that you would have been hanging on to. So I see it almost as a bit of a fresh slate to start with 2021 to get a reasonable, you know, number in terms of what your taxation revenue is, got rid of those write-offs and then kind of move on from there. Debt servicing costs, again, not applicable because you don't have any debt. I know this is something that Belinda has definitely been looking at, the annual repayment limit and things like that to make sure that the township has, you know, enough wiggle room with all of the capital work you're going to be doing and how the funding works. So we might have something to talk about this year, but again, no debt has been taken on for capital. So again, a positive situation for the township for sure. And then the last slide, this just again speaks to if you're investing in your capital. So you're very close to 50%, which is again what you like to see when you're looking at investing in infrastructure for the township. I think that you know, we'll be seeing that number increasing just given the work that you're going to be doing. And 2020 was also a bit of an anomaly for capital work because so much of the year things were shut down. So I'm more than happy to go back over any of the other slides. I would just say, you know, from my point of view, and I work with a lot of municipal clients in Northern Ontario, a strong financial situation, really nice to see that increase in your financial assets. Great to see the increase in both your reserves set aside by council and your general service. I think that'll be helpful as you transition into your larger capital projects to provide a bit more flexibility for the township. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that anybody might have.
No, I don't have any more things.
Okay.
Okay, Kathy, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I would just like to say thank you. And you do such an amazing job. I really enjoy seeing your reports. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tiffany. So this motion is to approve the audit. So Kathy, will you first that?
Yes, I will.
And Rod, a second?
Yes.
Moved by Kathy, second by Rod, that the consolidated financial statements for the Corporation of the Township of Nairn and Hyman for the year ended December 31st, 2020, as presented to Council on May 17th, 2021, be accepted as presented. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is yes, so that's carried. Perfect. Thank you, Tiffany. You are good to go.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And we'll coordinate with Belinda to get those copies sent out to everybody so you have the book available.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, so now moving on to number 4, public meeting. So this motion is just to move into public meeting. So Rod, will you first that?
Yes.
Kathy, a second.
Yes.
Moved by Rod, second by Kathy, that the council meeting be temporarily adjourned at 7:33 for the purpose of a public meeting. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Carried. Okay. So now this is just to open the public meeting, or sorry, open the public meeting. Kathy, will you first that?
Yes.
Rod, a second.
Yes.
So moved by Kathy, second by Rod, that the pursuant to bylaw number 2007-9. The public meeting is now officially open for the purpose of hearing comments regarding the 2021 municipal budget. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Carried. Okay, I will ask now ask the CAO if she received any written comments regarding budget prior to today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I did not receive any comments either phoned in verbally or emailed.
Okay, so now I will ask each councillor if they have any questions or any comments regarding the budget.
No,
I'm good.
other than get a copy of the budget.
Okay, and I'm sure we can get that to you.
And
Okay.
next year I like to have it. Next year I like to have it before we discuss the budget, because I can't have our time with the computer here. I just soon have paperback, and it helped me out a lot more.
Okay.
And I know Kathy would like one too. So.
Yeah. Okay, so now we will, this is to close the public meeting. So Rod, will you move that?
Yes.
Kathy, a second?
Yes.
Okay, moved by Rod, second by Kathy, that the public meeting is now officially closed at 7:36 p.m. And the council meeting is now reconvened. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself? Carried. Okay, so now this motion is to approve the budget. Rod, will you first that?
Yes.
Kathy, a second?
Yes.
Moved by Rod, second by Kathy, that the 2020 municipal budget be approved with the amount required for taxation totaling $887,247.00. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Motion carries. Okay, moving now on to minutes and reports. This is for the Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Committee minutes meeting May 7th. I know there was some pressing topics that I would like to see passed tonight, but there was also some things that we can defer to the next regular council meeting. So this is just to accept the minutes. Kathy, will you first?
Yes.
Rod, a second?
Yes.
Moved by Kathy, second by Rod, that the following minutes and reports are accepted as presented. The Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Committee minutes, May 7th, 2021. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself, that's carried. Okay, so there was a few things that was discussed because the budget had not been discussed or passed. They were just requesting some funds from council. So this motion is for $700 for the hanging basket project. So Kathy, will you first that?
Yes.
And Rod, a second?
Yes.
Moved by Kathy, second by Rod, whereas the council notes the Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Resolution number 2021 Rec 22 requesting a budget of $700 for the hang basket project. Therefore, be it resolved that council accepts the budget amount and therefore, and further that this amount be allocated to the recreation miscellaneous account. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Motion carries. Okay, the next one is $100 for to get the community gardens going. I know that Ecom had given us a donation, so this cost was fairly low. So Rod, can I get a first?
Yes.
And Kathy, a second.
Yes.
Okay, moved by Rod, second by Kathy, whereas the council notes the Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Resolution number 2021 Rec-24 requesting a budget for $100 for the construction in the Nairn and Hyman Community Garden raised beds. Therefore, be it resolved that council accepts the budget amount, and further that this amount will be allocated to the recreation miscellaneous account. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is yes, so that carries.
Whereabouts this garden going to be located?
Yeah, so that's up for discussion. That's our next our next motion is to discuss that. We can defer that to the next council meeting, but we, as a committee, we're looking for council's direction to see where that could be located. We did come up with a few suggestions. Somewhere around kind of the parking lot around the rink or around the municipal office, to take a little section of that was discussed, or on the other side of the playground towards the other side of the road down that way. So we can discuss it tonight and ask them or go for a location, or we can defer that motion to the next council meeting where we can all discuss it.
I'd prefer to defer the decision, just because I'd like to go and actually have a look. I apologize. I was very busy this weekend and didn't have an opportunity to go and look around. I had suggested at some point down at the ball field too. There's lots of space there. And I know while it's a little bit of a walk for people, like in the light of, participation or, exercise and whatnot, I don't think it's too far to go to attend your just a thought.
Yeah, I know there was some concern around like water hookup or just central location for the ball field. But yeah, if we want to move this to the June meeting, I don't see a problem with that.
I think we should leave it till next meeting, and we're all here. The ball field, the one thing against it, it's out of sight and everything, eh? There could be a lot of damage done to the garden at one time or another, eh? You'd be better in town someplace, I think. That's my opinion right now. So if we refer it to the next meeting, that'd be fine.
Okay. So I'll need, Belinda, I would need a motion for that, correct?
Yeah, you would. I believe I did include an alternate with your package.
Okay. Yeah, let me take a look here. So there's two for the tiny library, but I'm not seeing another one. I'm not seeing another one for that.
I do have notes if you want me to.
Could I just
out to you and you could write it?
Okay, so could I put? So I could just use this. Whereas council notes the Township of Nairn and Hyman's Community Park and Recreation request for a proposed location. Therefore, be it resolved that council defers the decision until the next regular council meeting.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I had in my notes.
Okay, I'm just going to write it up here. Okay, so this is just to defer. Rob, will you first that?
Yes.
Kathy, a second?
Yes.
Okay, so moved by Rod, second by Kathy, whereas the that council notes the Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Committee resolution number 2021 rec-23 requesting council's direction for the proposed location in Nairn and Hyman Community Garden. Therefore, be it resolved that council defers the decision until the next regular council meeting. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Carried. Okay, moving on. There was another motion about a location for the tiny library. So I have two motions, whether that we approve the project or that we request a report outlining the proposed location and design. I know this was also something else that we were talking about on the committee where we weren't sure where to put it. We were thinking kind of outhouse size bookshelves and weatherproof it so the books stay safe during all the 4 seasons. So I think if we send this back to the committee, then we can come up with a proposed location and a design for the library. If that's good with you guys.
Yes.
Okay. So Kathy, will you first that?
Yes.
And Rod a second?
Yes.
Okay, moved by Kathy, second by Rod, whereas council notes the Township of Nairn and Hyman Community Parks and Recreation Committee Resolution 2021 Rec 2025 seeking council's approval for a tiny library to be erected near the municipal office. Therefore, be it resolved that council requests a report outlining the proposed location and design of the tiny library. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
And myself is yes. And so that carries. Okay. So this is for the, we'll move now to the confirmatory bylaw. Kathy, will you first?
Yes.
Rod, a second.
Yes.
Okay, moved by Kathy, second by Rod, that being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the Corporation of Township of Nairn and Hyman be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council, and its number shall be 2021-15. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Carries. Okay, and this is to close. Rod, will you first?
Yes.
Kathy, a second.
Yes.
Moved by Rod, second by Kathy, that the meeting of May 17th, 2021 do now adjourn at 7:48 p.m. To meet again on the 14th day of June, 2021 at 7 p.m. or at the call of the mayor. Kathy, in favor?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes. Hopefully it's at the hall.
Yeah, exactly. And that's carried. All right.
Okay, good night, folks. Good night,
Thanks,
folks.
everyone.
You did a good
Night.
job there. Bye now.
Thank you.
Hi,
Bye.
and next year I'll make sure I get you all paper copies of the agenda, or sorry, the budgets.
Thank you. And thank you for doing such a good job with our financials there, Belinda. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate it.
You do a good job.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
everyone have an awesome night.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, Fred.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.